fascinating research by Robert Kuzmin and colleagues challenges this long-held notion and assumption that racial categorization is inevitable. In fact, arguing that what was more important was coalitions rather than racial categorization. Whether someone is a friend or a foe was more easily perceived by people than what race that person particularly depend on. When you actually look at it, we look at the example of Russian soldiers. So Russian white soldiers to Americans are not friends just because they're white. In fact, to a lot of white Americans and white politicians and politicians in general in America, those Russian soldiers are enemies even though they're white. In contrast, black soldiers who have fought and died for the United States of America, if they were to be viewed as enemies because they are black, that would be a grave mistake. So this goes to show this idea of coalition versus categorizing people primarily based on their race first. And when Kuzmin set out to disprove or dispel this particular notion, he did an experiment where he created two groups of four. In these two groups of four, in one group, they had 2 black students and 2 white peoples, and 2 black students in the other group and 2 white peoples. So what ended up happening was he made these 2 groups listen to each other's conversations and made it overtly clear that these groups did not like each other. At the end of the conversation, he did a memory test. And when he did the memory test, he found that people were more likely to confuse folks across groups rather than across race. So in other words, when they listened to a black person speaking from the other group, they didn't confuse it with a black person from their group. So this goes to show, this study is actually a very promising study to humanity and to us as a whole, that racial categorization can be unlearned. So if we can unlearn racial categorization, maybe we can also unlearn being prejudiced, being racist, and discriminating against others. And in this study, in this lesson, we're going to delve deeper into that and understand how do we become anti-racist. But before we do that, you know how we do it. We gotta first get a little bit of an anti-racist hot dog meal before we go on with our show. Welcome to the Anti-Racist Hot Dog. I am your host, Wandile Mthiyane, and I am excited today because we have our favorite chef, Chef Pali Pali, who's going to be taking us on a journey to a new African culture through African cuisines. Ladies and gentlemen, Chef Pali Pali. Welcome back, Chef Pali Pali.
Thank you for having me back.
Always a pleasure having you. What are we learning about today and which culture are we exploring?
So today we're taking it to India.
Hey, India. So a little
and
Durban.
South Africa.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we're taking it down south to Durban.
Yeah.
Coastal city in South Africa.
That's my hometown.
And actually the second largest population of Indian people.
Outside of India.
Exactly, outside of India. So of course they have lent us, plethora of their knowledge of spices and
great flavors.
Yeah, and like mind-blowing flavors.
Yeah.
So we're doing a classic lamb curry dish today, and we're relating it to more of a Sunday lunch, which is what we call 7 colors.
Ooh, okay.
Yes. So basically, we have Thanksgiving every Sunday. So there's going to be a classic Indian take and South African fusion because we're not really big on spice.
Yeah.
So obviously, we sort of dumb it down a little bit.
Just tone it down.
Yeah, we just tone it down a little bit according to the flavors, according to, old people that can't have chilies in the house. You just adapt it to your liking.
Just enough.
Enough.
Where we have the flavor, but not too hot.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's lamb, which is my favorite meat in general. Yeah. So yeah, I'm pretty excited to whip up a storm and give you a very colorful plate.
This sounds amazing. I'm gonna leave you to whip up that storm as I go talk about racism.
Awesome.
And we'll be back to taste.
All right.
Thank you very much. This is the episode we've all been waiting for, and that is how. How do we become part of the solution? How do we become anti-racist? How are we going to champion anti-racism within the workplace, within our communities, and within our homes? And for this, ladies and gentlemen, I am joined by our expert and senior how to become part of the solution correspondent, Smu Sisamthimkhulu. Smu. It's a pleasure to have you again, my friend.
It's a pleasure to see you again, man.
Thank you, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Help us solve this problem of racism, sir. So how do I become part of the solution? Now, this is very interesting because researchers talk about one of the key things being breaking down some of these barriers, these categories that we have, these social categories that we rely on to perceive people. So the two strategies they talked about is the strategy of decategorization and recategorization. So decategorization is when you look at me as Wandile Mthiyane rather than just a black man, right?
Yeah,
and then recategorization is, take for example, the University of Michigan, right? White students and black students. So during the normal day, during the normal school week, the black students may be part of the out group to white students.
Of course.
But during a football match against the University of Notre Dame, everyone is part of the same coalition, right? They're part of the same group. So now I want you to explain to us, like, how does this happen that in one part I'm part of this affiliation that's very diverse, next I'm an outsider, and how does this affect racism, and how can we move forward and create categories that are better for us to be inclusive?
Wandile, what I love about contact is that it improves intergrouping. Instead of taking perception of what you think people are, you actually realize that
who they actually are.
You actually realize who they actually are. And studies do prove that. Because if you're a group of whites and blacks in one in one venue, when you come together, first of all, maybe the first day you'll separate. Because you want to relate.
To your in-group.
Into your in-group, you know? And then after some times you associate with them, and then you actually think, no, we are not different. We are not that different. We are alike, but yet we are different at the same time. So that stems away from actually putting race into picture rather than putting similarities.
100%. This idea that we are more alike than we are different.
Of course.
So it's interesting you say this because a UK researcher came up with a hybrid between recategorization and decategorization. And this hybrid basically says trying to not categorize people is a futile exercise. We are naturally inclined to categorize people. So instead of avoiding it, recategorize these people with more elements. So whenever you think of John, John is not just black. But John is also an architect. John is a swimmer. John is the mate that I like to go to the pub with.
Of course.
What do you think about this?
Yes, he's a fanatic. He's a guitarist. That's what they usually associate with.
Because there's so much more to a person than just their skin color.
Of course. One thing we need to understand as humans. We need to get rid of this notion or illusion that we see no race.
We don't see color.
We don't see color. You understand? So those notions, I just put them into rest and actually look at the bigger picture on what, as humans, what can we contribute
100%.
in terms of us being in the presence at the moment. Exactly.
So where I see you as Smooth, not just as a black man, but also an actor.
Of course.
100%. So Smooth, I guess a very simple way, tool that people can take from this is that when you think about a particular person, think about 4 other things that you can add to them rather than just who you think they are and how you perceive them. So they're an architect, they're all of these things that we've talked about. And another element that researchers have found to work really well is this concept of vivid counter-stereotyping. So in other words, if you think of a black person as someone who's scary, right? And that's someone you don't want to be around. Wake up every morning and tell yourself that black people are pleasant people that you want to actually be around. This has actually been proven to be one of the most effective ways of reducing implicit bias. There's a research that was done, right, where individuals were made to read a story. And in the story, they were the main character. So the main character has just finished drinking after a long night and is walking, wobbling away from the bar. When a white man drives by, beats him up and puts them in a trunk. And before the white man will drive away with him, a young black man sees the incident, actively runs over to them, saves the day, rescues these folks, And when the participants were made to read this story, were asked to take an implicit bias test, keeping the story in mind right after reading the story, their implicit bias results were significantly less than before they had read the story. So this goes to show the impact of this vivid stereotype. Sorry, vivid counter-stereotype. Yeah.
We should be mindful of what we associate ourselves with, should I say. Because as black people, we like to stretch most of the time rather than to look at what we have.
Yeah.
For example, if, let's just put people's names in the chart.
Yeah.
Like Oprah,
Yeah.
Jay-Z.
Yeah.
Those people are at the far end of what we can associate ourselves with.
Yeah.
Even though we are black-skinned.
Yeah.
You understand? Let's try to associate ourselves with something that's near.
Sure.
Who's your favorite person in your community?
Yeah.
How are they influencing you in a positive dilemma?
Yeah.
How are you growing from looking at it and
Yeah.
that? And then from that image, we know that, okay, I can relate, I'm black, I look like this person.
Yeah.
Rather than stretching that far for us to actually hit a meaning of no end.
So in other words, what you're saying is we should be mindful of the images that we surround ourselves with.
Yes.
Because those images shape who we are.
Of course.
When I walk into my office or when I walk into a classroom, are all the images of the people on the wall, do they all look like me?
Exactly.
Or are there people from other cultures and other groups that I admire and look up to? This idea of looking beyond the obvious.
Exactly.
The Jay-Z's, the Beyoncé's, etc. What are the 5 black people that inspire me, that I know?
That you know personally.
Yeah.
Rather than looking at what's out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Smoo, one of my favorite strategies to counteract racism is called hypocrisy induction. Okay. This is basically where you make your claim towards anti-racism and what you want to become like. And then you look back in your life at all the points where you've fallen short at reaching this ideal, with the sole reason to go back and rectify some of those discrepancies so that you don't make the same mistakes moving forward. This is actually even more effective if you do it with a friend, because you can hold each other accountable to this ideal that you have set up, right? But I think even more powerful than this is this idea of speaking up. You know, research shows that when black people speak up about their own oppression, they are often seen less than the actual perpetrators who may be white or of a particular different race, right? So we need to be the ones who speak up. And research shows that when white people speak up against discrimination, even for black people, they're more likely to be heard than the person who was actually discriminated against. So let's use our privilege, let's use our positions of power to then advocate for those that don't have it.
After all, we all want to win this race.
Yes.
After all, we all want to work together.
Yes.
You know, and it's not about the individual battles.
Yes.
It's about everyone.
Yes.
In winning the long-term battles of what we are trying to go through.
Yes.
Things
this
like
war called life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Things like racism.
Yes.
Prevent us from doing those things.
Yeah.
Prevent us from leading forward. Prevent us from even winning.
As the saying goes, umuntu ngabantu.
Please explain that to us.
Yes, the saying is actually saying people are united with people.
100%.
Because we are humans.
100%. Yeah.
You understand?
So in other words, this thing of racism hurts us from us reaching our collective goals as a society.
Exactly.
So this thing of racism effectively hurts us collectively as a society from reaching our goals.
Exactly.
And so what I've learned from you, Smoo, and this amazing conversation we've had today are 5 things that we can do to be anti-racist, to be a part of the solution rather than the problem. And I'm going to read these things with you. So number 1, this idea of being pro-social in civic engagement. So going out to vote and voting for candidates who are promoting racial equity, right? Selective consumerism. Pay attention to the practices of your vendors. Buy from people who harbor the same notions of bringing an equal and equitable world. Mentorship and sponsorship. Dedicate time to the development of others. Not just others that look like you, but others that don't look like you. You know, let's leverage this privilege. Civic activism. Engage in demonstrations that lead to policy change for industry and inclusivity. Right? What are you doing to bring about policy that shapes a more equitable future for all?
Of course.
Last but not least, financial contributions. Support organizations whose role is to bring about social justice and active change for communities. Swoo, it's been a pleasure having you today, my brother.
It's been a pleasure being here.
Thank you for teaching me how to be anti-racist and how to be a part of the solution.
Thank you, man. Thank you very much.
And there you have it, folks. This is the last episode of the Anti-Racist Hot Dog series. I'm your host, Wandile Mthiyane, and this is the Anti-Racist Hot Dog Cooking Show. And we are done. This food looks amazing.
Yes. This is a season finale
Ooh.
dish, definitely.
The final dish, ladies and gentlemen.
So this
What
is
do
a
we have here?
classic South African 7 colors situation. Mainly
Sunday.
because, yes, for Sunday especially.
Yeah.
So here we've got our lamb curry,
Uh-huh.
some basmati rice, which is a long grain rice.
Yeah.
Very Indian, some coriander as well. And then we've got pumpkin and beetroot.
Beetroot,
And the
yes.
beetroot is actually stirred in with chutney.
Oh, chutney.
There's a very South African sauce called chutney here, which is basically stewed fruits.
Stewed fruit.
Yes, stewed
so
fruits.
chutney is not ushatin.
No. Chutney is stewed fruits.
Okay,
Yes,
stewed
stewed
fruit.
fruits. And it's made by a famous old lady, I don't even know when she died,
Yeah.
called Mrs. Balls.
Ah.
Yes.
The fact that you know her name says a lot. But as we know, I can taste this delicious
Yes.
food because I'm vegetarian. But we're going to call camera number 1.1. Camera number 2, please come over. And taste the food. Camera number 2.
Yo, how's it going? Good?
I'm doing good, man.
I'm fine.
Help us out here. We've got a very hard task for you.
Let's do this. Can I introduce myself?
Yeah, please.
Camera number 1.1. So what do I take? Just all of it at once? Or?
However you want to eat it.
Okay. Do I get the green stuff out the way?
You should eat it with the green stuff. Of course, you'll go for the meat first.
Of course.
Oh, man. And you still have to rate this, by the way. We need to know on a scale of anti-racist to racist where this food falls.
With my eyes closed.
Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. 6th anti-racist meal in a row.
In a row. It's a hat trick.
That's amazing. Thank you very much for being a part of this experience
It's a
and being a part of this
pleasure.
show. I think I'm going to be a great cook.
Yes, you should be.
You know, and maybe I may stop being vegetarian. We'll see about that. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a blast.
Ladies and gentlemen, Chef Pali Pali, and that's it for us at the Anti-Racist Hot Dog Show. I am your host, Wandile Mthiyane.